A warm summer breeze ruffled the ash-blonde hair of a young woman who hummed softly to herself while tending to a row of herbs in her mother's garden. Her serenity was cut short when 3 young children burst from the house. They were yelling and screaming and carrying on as they were chased out by their mother. The young woman shook her head at the commotion. "Scarlett!" the youngest yelled and barreled towards her. Scarlett acted like she hadn't heard her brother's shrill call. Instead, she carefully plucked the delicate flowers of a cornflower plant. She heard the rustle of the ground the moment before her brother launched himself. She whirled around just in time to catch him. He squealed in surprise. "I've told you 100 times, Randall. Mother's garden isn't somewhere to play," Scarlett scolded. "Now, off with you before I turn you into a toad." Scarlett set Randall on his feet and gently shooed him away. He ran after his siblings like nothing had happened. Scarlett shook her head again at their antics before finishing her harvest. Her basket was full of different herbs when she finally re-entered the house. The mixture of freshly baked goods and herbs was a beacon of serenity for Scarlett. Her father, Jasper, was a baker who was well known for his pastries, and her mother, Prudence, was known for her incredible healing abilities. People came from far and wide for her tinctures and advice. Scarlett, the oldest of their 6 children, had been learning both professions since she was young. Scarlett was now 12 and proficient at both jobs. "Where would you like these, Mother?" Scarlett asked, showing Prudence the basket. "Hang the leaves near the hearth and the flowers on the table by the window for now," Prudence instructed from her seat at the large table in the center of the room. "Are you all right, Mother?" Scarlett questioned. "Yes, I just got too warm," Prudence replied, then started coughing. Small speckles of blood dotted her hand she used to cover her mouth. "Your cough has gotten worse. Perhaps you should take something," Scarlett offered. "I want you to listen to me. And don't tell anyone. Promise me you won't say anything," Prudence pleaded. When Scarlett nodded earnestly, she continued. "I'm dying, my love." "Don't be silly. I'll make an herb tea," Scarlett said. "It won't help. I've already tried everything," Prudence said. "And you're not going to try to treat me. What are the 2 most important rules of this trade?" "Never treat the rich, and never treat those who have death standing next to them unless it's for comfort," Scarlett sighed. "But I'm sure this is something we can beat." "It's too late, Scarlett," Prudence insisted. "I've already seen my death." Scarlett stared at her mother. She believed her. She had noticed the grey cast to her skin and the weight loss she had tried to hide. Scarlett had brushed it off as exhaustion, but all the signs pointed toward terminal illness. Tears welled in her eyes, and she was about to go to her mother when her sisters, Matilda and Hazel, came running through the door, with Jack, Henry, and Randall hot on their heels. The children raced around the kitchen. "Out!" Scarlett ordered. The children scurried back outside. The kitchen was deathly quiet while Scarlett processed what her mother had just said to her. She was scared for her mother and for her family. "Fear won't guide you," Prudence pointed out. "We need to prepare you to take over. I'm not sure how long I have left." "I will never be prepared to lose you," Scarlett whimpered. "You may not want to lose me, my love, but it's going to happen one way or another," Prudence said resolutely. "Now, let's get these fresh herbs drying." For the next 2 months, Scarlett hardly left her mother's side. Jasper caught on that something was amiss very quickly, but after Prudence's explanation, he understood that there was nothing any of them could do. When the air turned cool and crisp, Prudence struggled more every day. October 31st, Scarlett's birthday, marked the rapid decline of Prudence's health. She struggled to walk the few steps from her bed to her chamber pot without becoming winded. "Scarlett!" Prudence called from her bed. "Yes, Mother," Scarlett said as she rushed in. "Can you take me to the garden? I would like fresh air," Prudence explained. "Mother, it's terrible outside," Scarlett objected. "I know, my love, but it's time. Prudence coughed, splattering her kerchief with blood. "Please, Scarlett." Scarlett closed her eyes and nodded. She helped her mother sit up and swing her legs over the side of the bed. Scarlett slipped shoes over her mother's icy feet and draped her warm winter shawl across her shoulders. The two of them moved slowly until they were out in the brisk, damp air. Prudence took a deep breath and immediately started coughing. When she regained her composure, her complexion had paled significantly. "We should go back inside," Scarlett insisted. "No, I want to sit under the tree," Prudence declared. "Mother, please," Scarlett pleaded, trying to guide Prudence back inside. "No," Prudence said. "I don't want to die in bed." Scarlett took a deep breath to steady herself before moving toward the oak tree in the center of the yard. The stone bench beneath it was bone-chilling when they sat on it. Prudence shivered violently. Scarlett wrapped her arm and her own shawl around her shoulders, but her shivering only intensified. They sat there in silence while the birds who didn't migrate sang to one another. The overcast sky added to the somber mood. Scarlett let silent tears fall, knowing these were the last moments with her mother. After a while, Prudence stopped shivering. "I love you, Scarlett," she muttered. "I love you too, Mother," Scarlett said, looking down at Prudence, who was leaning against her. Scarlett heard her take a deep rattling breath, then went still. She felt her mother slip away. Tears streamed down her face as she carefully moved and repositioned her mother's fragile body so she was on her back with her hands across her chest. Scarlett sank to the ground next to the bench. "I'm so sorry, Mother." "Rest now," Scarlett sobbed, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. When her father found her, over an hour later, she was still knelt next to her mother's body. Her tears had dried, leaving trails down her rosy cheeks. Jasper helped her to her feet and hugged her tightly. His tears soaked her hair, but her numbness wasn't just physical at that point. She had no more tears to shed. "You should go inside and warm up," Jasper suggested. "I can't leave her," Scarlett protested. A strong wind blasted them, making the remaining leaves that were barely holding on rain down. A faint scent of rosemary was carried along with the leaves. The world around them went silent the moment the wind dissipated. "Go inside. I will fetch you when the grave is dug," Jasper ordered. Scarlett trudged back inside where her brothers and sisters were huddled together. The moment they saw her walk in alone, their wails filled the air. All five rushed to Scarlett, who dropped to her knees to embrace them. She tried to comfort them, but they were inconsolable. She sat there for a while before shifting them toward the warm fire crackling in the hearth. "Scarlett, it's ready," Jasper called from the door. "Right. Go fetch your warm coats and shoes," Scarlett instructed. "I'll be out soon, Father." Scarlett collected a few crystals that her mother would often use during healing sessions, along with sprigs of thyme, rosemary, a small bundle of sage, and a handful of lavender. She waited for her siblings to shuffle into the kitchen before she led the way across the desolate yard. Under the oak, on the opposite side of the bench, a freshly dug grave awaited its occupant. Jasper had filled the bottom of the grave with just enough pebbles to cover the dirt. Then a layer of firewood made a bed. Scarlett and Jasper carefully lowered Prudence's body until it rested on the wood. Carefully, Scarlett placed herbs that she had brought on and alongside her mother, while her family watched. When she finished, her father scattered fresh straw over Prudence, then stacked wood on top while Scarlett placed crystals around the grave. Scarlett's siblings wailed when Jasper doused the pyre with melted animal fat and used a flint to light a bit of tinder that he then used to set the wood ablaze. The initial flash of fire turned into a raging inferno. The flames soon garnered the attention of the neighbors. Their chipper expressions faded when they saw the tear-soaked faces of Jasper and Scarlett's siblings. Scarlett, however, was still unable to cry. She stood by as more people flocked to the yard. No one questioned the lack of a priest or a church burial. When the children began to shiver, Scarlett shooed them back to the house. The crowd dispersed when the wind began to gust. Some touched Scarlett's shoulder, but she didn't move or react to the contact. The stench of burned flesh and hair lingered in the air long after the fire calmed. Darkness was encroaching when Jasper escorted Scarlett into the house. The sudden sensation of pins and needles throughout her body made her realize just how cold she had gotten. "You should eat," Jasper offered as he stoked the fire in the hearth. "I'm not hungry, but I can make you and the children something," Scarlett said. "We already ate," Jasper replied. "Did you not realize you were alone out there?" "Mother was there," Scarlett muttered. "I'm going to wash and go to bed." Jasper hugged Scarlett tightly. His scent filled her nose and she began to violently sob into his chest. The numbness that she had felt most of the day was gone in an instant. She felt helpless. Her sobs turned into quiet whimpers before she calmed down. "I failed her," Scarlett sniffled. "Now, you listen to me, Scarlett. No one failed," Jasper responded. "There was absolutely nothing anyone could have done. Now, go wash and get some rest." Scarlett nodded and went to her room after heating some water for her wash basin. She put some lavender in the water to steep while she undressed. She used the infused water to cleanse her body. She wiped the soot and grime from her skin. The soothing scent of lavender helped to calm her raging mind and sore body. When she finished, she quickly readied herself for bed. She climbed under the blankets, trying to ward off the chill both of the room and her body. She tossed and turned for hours until a restless sleep took her. She dreamed of her mother. Memories played rapidly until the last moments she had with her mother. At the end, her mother spoke to her. She could barely understand her words, but the voice soothed the pain momentarily, allowing Scarlett a few hours of peaceful sleep. After Prudence's passing, weeks turned to months and months to years. Scarlett continued her mother's practice with a few adjustments to fit her style. Her ability, much like her mother's, was well known throughout Britain. She also continued to help her father run the bakery and raise her siblings. Jack and Henry, the next oldest children, became more involved in the bakery as Scarlett's days became more filled with her clientele. The spring after her 16th birthday was particularly busy for Scarlett. The harsh winter and cold and wet spring had increased the number of respiratory cases she saw. Many people who had to work outdoors fell victim to a variety of illnesses. "Scarlett!" a man yelled as he burst through the door to her newly built sick house. "Yes," Scarlett responded calmly, looking up from her notebook. "We need your help," the man explained, hurriedly stepping aside to allow two more men carrying another to come in. The man they carried groaned when he was set on the bench by the table. His shirt was soaked with blood from a gaping wound on his chest. His hazel eyes fluttered as he fought to remain conscious. "What happened?" Scarlett asked as she cut the man's shirt off. "We work on the docks, and was helping another ship unload. Well, some of the cargo rigging snapped and slapped him," one of the men explained. Scarlett examined the wound closely. The bleeding had slowed, meaning clots were forming. The stench of alcohol filled the air. Scarlett set to work. She ordered the men to fetch 2 pails of water while she prepared to work on the man. When the others returned with the water, Scarlett poured a pail into a cauldron that she hung in the fire. Once the water was hot enough, she washed her hands and began to clean the man's chest. He moaned and thrashed when Scarlett scrubbed at the wound. "Bring me the vial labeled Dwale," Scarlett instructed, and when the men just stood there and stared at her in confusion, she sighed with frustration. "The small brown vial on the second shelf of that cabinet." "Sorry, miss. The only one of us who can read is him," one of the men answered, gesturing to the man on the bench. "Fantastic," Scarlett sighed and uncorked the bottle. "Take a swig." Scarlett lifted the man's head so he could drink the sedative. He spluttered when the bitter liquid hit his tongue, but it didn't take long before his eyelids drooped and his breathing slowed. The moment his hands fell to his side, Scarlett went back to work. She supported his right arm on her lap and tucked his left hand into his trouser pocket to keep the wound from stretching. Once the area was clean, Scarlett had the men move their comrade to the mattress on the other side of the room, while she gathered a needle and suture made from beef sinew. She soaked both in a bowl of hot water before letting them cool. She began to sew the wound. The men watched in awe as the skin came back together. She used butcher broom powder to stop the bleeding the needle caused. "What's his name?" Scarlett asked. "Eric, ma'am," the first man told her. "And your names?" "I'm Paul, this is Oliver, William, and Lucas," the first man that had burst in introduced the group. "Thank you," Scarlett said, focusing on her suture. When she finished, she checked over her work to ensure that she hadn't missed anything. Satisfied, Scarlett gently and carefully cleansed Eric's chest. Paul, Oliver, William, and Lucas examined her work with looks of awe on their faces. "Is there someone that should be notified regarding his whereabouts?" Scarlett addressed the men. They all stared at her blankly. "Does he have a wife or family?" "No," Paul replied quickly. "I see," Scarlett nodded. "Well then, I suppose he will be staying here with me until he recovers." The men nodded and left quickly when Scarlett shooed them out. She began to clean her mess while Eric snored softly. She continuously checked for swelling, especially around the sutures. After a couple hours, Eric began to stir. Scarlett looked up from her notebook and watched him. His eyes fluttered open and his fingers flew to his chest. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Scarlett warned before Eric bolted upright. He groaned and clutched his chest. "I told you." "Who in God's name are you?" Eric demanded, while trying to get up. "I am the person who fixed you up. Now, lay back down," Scarlett ordered, but she didn't move from her seat. "Very forceful," Eric scoffed. Scarlett cocked her eyebrow before returning to writing. She ignored Eric's stare for as long as she could. She could feel him watching and assessing her. After a while she became uncomfortable under his watchful gaze. "If you don't stop staring at me, I will make you," Scarlett snapped. "I can't help but stare," Eric said. "Been on the docks too long? Or just never seen a girl?" Scarlett retorted. "Never seen one as beautiful as you," Eric admired. "I find that very hard to believe," Scarlett laughed. "Why?" "You probably have women throwing themselves at you," Scarlett admitted, and immediately regretted her words. Eric laughed, but stopped suddenly and gripped his chest. Scarlett moved to his side quickly. She moved his hand and examined the wound closely. She gently prodded around the sutures, but nothing seemed out of place. "I'm fine," Eric reassured her. "I'm Eric, by the way." "Scarlett," she introduced herself. "Pleasure," Eric nodded. "So, am I free to go?" "No," Scarlett replied simply. "Here's what money I have," Eric said, reaching into his coin pocket. "I can get more when I get paid." "This is more than enough," Scarlett remarked, "but that's not why you can't leave. You need to stay for at least 2 days so that I can ensure you're healing properly." "I can't stay that long!" Eric exploded. "You can, and you will," Scarlett said calmly. "And trying to scare me won't work. Now lay back." Scarlett gently pushed Eric back. Her efforts were met with resistance, but he eventually gave in and laid back. She covered him with a blanket before walking away. She tended the fire and hummed softly. By the time she turned back toward Eric, his eyes were closed and his breathing slow. She returned to the table and continued writing out tinctures. She stayed there for hours until the room grew too dark for her to see the pages properly. She stretched and quietly checked on Eric, who was sleeping soundly. She watched him for a moment. He fascinated her for some reason. She shook her head and walked to the other bed on the opposite side of the room. She readied herself for bed while watching to ensure Eric didn't wake while she did so. Once under the covers, she stared at the ceiling for hours before restless sleep took her. The next morning she rose before dawn. She got the coals on the hearth rekindled before checking on Eric to make sure he was still doing well. Before she hurried to the main house where her father, Jack, and Henry had already started their morning. The wonderful smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. "Good morning," Scarlett greeted as she washed her hands. "Good morning," the three of them said in unison. Scarlett helped for a few hours before returning to check on Eric. Panic flooded her at the sight of his empty bed, but before she could rush out, she plowed into him. He groaned but caught her before she toppled over. "I'm so sorry," Scarlett exclaimed. "Are you all right?" "Fine," Eric muttered. "Just went to piss and you were gone." "I'm sorry, I was helping my father and brothers in the bakery," Scarlett explained. "Are you hungry?" "A little, but I should go," Eric grunted. "Nonsense," Scarlett dismissed. "Sit." "You're quite bossy, little lady," Eric huffed. "I have to be to keep my siblings in line," Scarlett smiled. "Now please sit. Is porridge acceptable? Otherwise I can make something else." "Porridge is fine," Eric said as he took a seat at the table. "What's this?" "My recipes," Scarlett said and grabbed her notebook before Eric could, which earned her a surprised look. Scarlett prepared porridge and made some tea. She set it down in front of Eric with a small smile. She cleaned everything and waited for him to finish before clearing the table. "You're welcome to relax in bed or in the garden," Scarlett offered. "I need to go back and help my father. Please let me know if you need anything." With that, Scarlett left. She wasn't sure if Eric would stay or disappear, but she hoped he would stay. When she returned to the main house, the front bakery was already flooded with patrons. Many of them greeted Scarlett immediately with cheerful smiles. Most had been treated by Scarlett or had relatives that had gone to her. Scarlett became so immersed in the chaos that she didn't notice Eric slip in and sit in the corner. She finally realized he was there when someone shouted his name when they made it to the counter. Scarlett whipped her head toward him and blushed when he smiled at her. For the rest of the morning, Scarlett was acutely aware of his presence. She tried to ignore the butterflies in her stomach every time she caught him smiling at her, but the more she tried, the harder it became to focus on the people in front of her. By early afternoon, Scarlett was exhausted. She sank onto the stool behind the counter. The business had slowed finally. "Quite impressive," Eric said from his seat. "Is it always this busy?" "Most days, yes," Scarlett nodded. "How are you feeling?" "A little painful," Eric admitted. "Let's get you something for that. Follow me," Scarlett said, gesturing to him to come with her. Back in the cottage, Scarlett brewed a special mixture of herbs. When the brew was fragrant, she poured a cup for Eric. He wrinkled his nose but gulped it down. He made a face that made Scarlett giggle. "That's a beautiful sound," Eric smiled at her. Scarlett blushed. For the rest of the afternoon, the two of them stayed in the cottage and talked. By evening, Scarlett was swooning over him. She had never had anyone give her the kind of attention Eric was giving her. After they ate their supper, they sat in the garden and listened to the sounds of the night. Scarlett began to shiver as the cool air settled in. "We should go back inside before you catch cold," Eric suggested. Scarlett nodded and led the way. The warmth of the glowing fire warded off the chill. Scarlett made some tea to help Eric sleep, and when he was asleep, she readied herself for bed. His soft snores lulled her to sleep, but she didn't sleep peacefully. Her violent dreams blasted her mind with images of pain and sorrow. She heard a cruel laugh echo through her. She bolted upright as sweat dripped down her brow. It took a few moments to regain her composure. She never fell back to sleep that night. She just stared into the darkness with the cruel laugh of her dream still haunting her.